You are listening to MCC GeoPod, the geopolitical podcast of the Mathias Corvinus Collegium, the largest talent management institute in Hungary. If you want to know more about our mission, please look up our English website at mcc.hu/en or check out our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter channels. For interesting articles and analysis of our professors and students, look up our knowledge base at corvinus.hu/en.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for listening to the MCC GeoPod. This one will be for sure an outstanding episode. I am sitting in the studio with Dr. Mark Milosch, who flew all the way from the United States to Hungary. Dr. Milosch has a law degree and a doctorate in modern European history and has worked in foreign affairs for the U.S. Congress, a federal agency, and a nonprofit foundation. He is also the author of the outstanding book titled Modernizing Bavaria. Welcome to the studio. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you very much, Kata.
Dr. Milosch, we are in fact living in treacherous times. A war broke out several months ago in our neighborhood. The EU is about to witness its biggest crisis. Europe is facing a winter without the cheap Russian gas. China is taking dangerous steps towards Taiwan, and North Korea has been testing its cruise missiles. And the United States is getting more and more pulled into this global conflict. In this episode, we will delve into the United States' foreign policy strategy. Dr. Milosch, can you give us a brief overview of the U.S. foreign policy strategy since the fall of the Iron Curtain?
Well, Kata, that is a big question, a tall order. I think I would have to do that by periodizing it and giving some sort of a priority approaches and issues. Really, after 1990, I would say there was a period I would call early euphoria, probably from 1990 through the late Clinton years, the 1996, 7, 8, in which there was just a tremendous amount of good feeling after the wall fell, in which the U.S. wanted to be genuinely helpful to the newly liberated countries of Eastern Europe, in which we wanted a good relationship with Russia. We wanted to be respectful of all the agreements that were made at the time that the wall fell, and generally be a good neighbor and support civil society as it really existed in these various countries. To be a constructive force, we thought that this would herald a new era, which China would follow, and so there was euphoria, optimism, genuine good neighborliness. It was, I think, most of us look back on that as a good period in U.S. foreign policy.
So now that the euphoria is over, what are the major international or global challenges of the United States?
Well, at the present moment, I guess we tend to divide that up into regions. We speak of China, Russia. Not so long ago, that there was the issue of Islamic terrorism in the Muslim world. The relationship with the EU. Obviously, right now, the immediate priority is Russia has a kind of urgency because of the war. Russia and the entire former Soviet space. But everyone understands that long term, if we get through this, the larger issue is China. I wouldn't really necessarily separate these things. I think the U.S. government takes it as a package issue, where the underlying issue here is what is the future world order? What will be the shape of that? And Russia and China are the two most prominent angles in how the American foreign policy establishment wants to shape the world order. The entire issue of Islamic terrorism seems to have faded in the past 15 years, mostly because the immediate threats have changed. Now it's less an issue of threat than the instability in the whole perimeter, stretching from Morocco to Pakistan.
So you talked about Russia, China, and the Islamic countries. But which countries are the most reliable and strongest allies of the United States nowadays? And what do we know about these relationships?
Well, I would say Great Britain has periodically reemerges during the Iraq War, and again in the struggle with Russia as always the United States' closest ally. They have the military capabilities. Our foreign policy elites know each other very well. It's a relationship that when we're not facing a war often, it's just sort of taken for granted, and we're not aware of how important that is. But so Britain remains, of course, at the center. The interesting thing is the switch in Europe. For a long time, the closest ally in Europe was Germany, certainly for Obama, the Obama-Merkel relationship. And I think in the Biden administration, the Americans wanted to look to Germany again, found that the Germans were on a different wavelength, and turned to Poland, a country that was not expected to be the Americans' best friend in Europe, but that's what it's come to be with the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
I've just read on the news that the U.S. and Poland are building a nuclear power plant. Have you heard about that? Like together?
No, this is new news to me as well.
All right. Like, this is true. Okay. So does the U.S. still perceive the NATO as a highly valuable alliance, or somewhat a bit of a liability? What do you think about this topic?
Well, I think the talk of NATO as a liability was always on a surface phenomenon. It's more a matter of what is the purpose of the alliance. It's certainly central to American foreign policy, not just for Europe, but really for all the surrounding regions. What is the only purpose of NATO is not principally to defend the United States. It's a tool for cooperative influence over the defense policies of much of the world. And it's not only a military tool, but because so many countries want to be in NATO, want a good relationship with NATO, see NATO as a solution to their problems, is also for the U.S. a tool, a bigger tool for influencing countries and changing their policies. In that membership in NATO, membership action plans, cooperation with NATO can be used as a bargaining chip on just about every issue that is in the U.S. relationship with other countries.
We were taught in middle school history class that the NATO's sole aim is to provide global peace. Is this true, or has this failed in a way?
I don't know how to respond. The aim to provide, certainly not global peace, but there has been a move since the end of the Cold War. There was a period when there was a long discussion about, well, what is the purpose of NATO? We'll never be at war with Russia. Obviously, that those ideas didn't that optimism with Russia wasn't well founded. But there was a period of thinking about how NATO could be used to resolve conflicts in all the neighboring regions, as far into Asia and even northern Africa. I think it's important to view NATO as not when we use the word alliance, it's easy to think of where we're cooperating in each other's defense. That can easily be challenged. Obviously, if the U.S. was ever invaded, we wouldn't be looking to Lithuania for our defense. The U.S. has military bases in all these countries. They don't have bases in the U.S. So it's a tool for the U.S. to have a kind of far forward defense of its interests, but also to shape the policies of other countries. And at the time, I think in the 1940s and 50s, when this was being thought through and created, there was a strategic calculus by which the American policymakers thought that to have 5 or 6 decision makers in the West for vis-a-vis in the face-off of the Soviet Union would be too dangerous. So if we could all get together into an alliance that the U.S. would dominate, we would all know each other, share common concepts of strategy. And when the U.S. could lead, it would be better for everybody. Since then, and as the alliance expanded, it's a tool also for to involve the U.S. in the inner security policy workings of other countries. It has a much broader purpose and agenda in shaping the policies of other countries, shaping world order.
Dr. Milosch, what are the basic differences and similarities between the Republican and the Democrat approach to the U.S. direction of foreign policy? And you're somewhat of an insider in this topic, so I think the listeners will be very thrilled by what you have to say.
Well, this is a funny question. In truth, I think on foreign policy, this is where the Democrat and Republican administrations really tend to agree the most in the daily political struggle to win elections. Of course, everyone emphasizes differences and acts like they agree on nothing. But when administrations change from Obama to Trump to Biden, generally in foreign policy, the relationships and priorities are changed only slightly, and the alternating parties have to struggle to try to find issues in which to profile great differences in policy that don't typically exist. In other words, the Republican foreign policy establishments in general, and this is true of every country I've had to deal with, are more in sync with the global conglomerated power structures. Whereas when you talk to Republicans on all kinds of domestic issues, there are genuine and deep differences with Democrats. Generally, the Republicans who are involved in the foreign policy process are more in sync. The chief difference is that the Democratic Party foreign policy structure is really very, very much part of the conglomerated power of Brussels, Berlin, the elite NGOs, think tanks, global financial power, where the Republicans are a little bit persona non grata in those circles, but they do seek to admittance, and the Republicans actually work with them better than perhaps I would like sometimes.
Yeah, Dr. Milosch, I'm a third-year law student here, and what I know about geopolitics right now is that the EU's view towards Russia has changed in the past month, and we view Russia as a strategic challenge and not a strategic partner anymore. So how does the U.S. perceive Russia at this moment?
Russia's a terrible, terrible problem, and has been for hundreds of years. Of course, no countries cause more harm to the countries on its perimeter over several hundred years than Russia. And of course, Putin and the people around him have not sought to separate themselves from this terrible legacy in any way, but have continued it. At the same time, Russia remains a country with legitimate interests, and people live there who are not wrapped up in or guilty of these crimes. So you can only feel bad for them, but you have to deal with the power, with the Russian power structure that's coming at us.
Midterm elections are coming up, right, in the United States.
Yes.
I have a question. If the Republicans got the majority in the midterm elections, would this have some kind of an impact on the U.S. foreign policy in the future? What do you think?
I don't think it would have very much impact. Foreign policy in the U.S. is the prerogative of the executive branch, and the House of Representatives, for example, would have, as whether Republican or Democrat, would have relatively little ability to influence it. The U.S. Senate supposedly is designed to be more involved in foreign policy, has a role in improving ambassadors and secretaries. In reality, the Republican Senate is not going to have a great deal of difference with the Biden administration. That they may seek to deny or hold up some appointments or whatnot. But as I was saying earlier about foreign policy establishments in general, the Republican senators who are involved in foreign policy are not headed toward any dramatic break with the Biden policies.
And Dr. Milosch, what about the American people? Do they want to change in the foreign policy? Do they care about it? Do they have an opinion about the EU, about Russia? I myself have never been to the United States, and I just cannot imagine what it's like there before the midterm elections.
On the U.S., the foreign policy, on the voters and the people, it's been commonly said for a long time that American people are not that interested in foreign policy, that they feel protected by the oceans, distant from these other countries. And but it's also commonly said that that's all changed in the age of globalization. Really, in the everyday mentality of the people, I don't think there's been such a great change. People may read about countries, but may read more foreign news, but it does tend to operate more at the level of what do you think of China? Yes, no, good, bad. Russia, yes, no, good, bad. But it doesn't really move beyond general friendly or negative feelings. The only things that would change that would be war. And from what I can tell, talking to many people, most Americans don't really feel that their immediate interest is that they need to make any hard decisions, or that our country has to make hard decisions in regard to Ukraine and Russia, but that we can afford to continue the policy of supporting Ukraine completely. They may disagree and think perhaps not so much. They may be startled to see occasionally a report about threat of nuclear war, but I haven't seen any evidence that people really feel that this is a crisis on which they have strong opinions and is going to drive voting. And I don't think any voter surveys have put foreign policy on the map of voters' top concerns.
Dr. Milosch, there is a song that I really like. It's an English song. It's called "To Be Human" and sang by a girl named Marina. And there is a verse in that: "There were riots in America just when things were getting better." How do you perceive it? Are there some kind of, I wouldn't say riots, but some kind of disappointment or dissatisfaction with how things are going in America right now?
I think there is a sense of alienation, but I think there's also a sense of confusion. Talking to people, I read a lot of news. I read a lot of commentary as well. There is a sense of alienation that Trump was able to tap into. A sense that the people running the country don't care about the everyday people who live here. It's difficult. I wouldn't say that that's been able to be channeled into anything, because it remains very unformed, and there are so much confusion about who's at fault and what the real issue is, what the real causes are, what can be done. But I think there is a kind of enemy or an alienation operating. I haven't seen anybody able to really take that in any direction, but the Trump movement was certainly an expression of that. If people were supporting Trump, many people, solely because they understood that, or chiefly because they understood the people running the country did not want them to do that, and so it was a way to express frustration.
So there is an alienation towards the regime or between the people? What do you mean with that there is an alienation?
I think there's a sense that the government does not seek to represent the people, the voters, that they're taken for granted, and that elite organizations are able to get what they want from the system, but the voters are not really considered, are not the priority of the government.
And Dr. Milosch, as a last question, what is your advice to younger people, to students and workers who will want to work in foreign policy making and just international law?
Wow, you caught me unexpected with that. Well, one of the things that I've often said over the years to young students and interns I've worked with when I worked for Congress is that when I was young in the 1980s, Europe was still fascinating, and it was a place of adventure, and a lot of us were headed toward Europe. Europe has become a lot more like America.
Has it really?
Yes, that's for sure. When I come to Europe a lot, and it used to be quite a different and exotic place, but you can see every time I come here the process of Americanization in music, food, styles, attitudes.
I guess that's a part of globalization.
Yes, it's not as exotic as it used to be. After 2000, there was a generation of young people that were interested in China, and also people studying Arabic. I've often encouraged young people to look at Africa. Africa remains fascinating, interesting, a large continent with countries maturing, markets maturing, things to do there, but it remains unpredictable, uncontrolled, a site of adventure. I've always enjoyed going to Africa, and the mood, the feeling in the street, the people. I would encourage everyone to look at that. If I had more chance to be in Africa, I would.
Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Milosch, for this really exciting episode. Thank you,
Kata.
Thank you for listening to the MCC GeoPod, and have a good day, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to this MCC GeoPod episode. For further media content, please look up our English website at mcc.hu/en, or look for us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you want to read more by our professors and students, check out our knowledge base at corvinus.hu/en.